So thank you everyone for joining our first panel of MRCon 2023. The subject of this panel is marketing and branding yourself. So let me go in what is, to me, counterclockwise fashion and ask the panelists to introduce yourselves and talk just a little bit about some of the marketing that you've done, but we'll get much more into that as we go through the panel, and we'll start with Heinrich.
Well, greetings all. My name is Heinrich. I'm one of the organizers for Miskatonic Repository Convention. I'm probably best known for my Heinrich's Call of Cthulhu Guide to Character Creation. And some folks may also know me from my Heinrich Moore Presents YouTube channel. In terms of marketing, well, that YouTube channel is an example of that very thing. And indeed, I have included an example of marketing just posting a music video announcement for my next work, the Carcosa Guide, right before this panel, because that's what it's all about. And we take all of these opportunities, and this is a very real example of that. So that's my marketing.
Great. And Ashley?
Hi, folks. I'm Ashley Warren. I'm the founder and director of the Storytelling Collective, through which we run the RPG Writer Workshop. And we are an online learning program for creative storytellers. We I guess focus on tabletop creation, but we have programs for all sorts of creative writing, and that requires a lot of marketing. So I have to get creative with how I market, and I actually have quite a lot of experience being a marketer in my career. I used to be a staunch marketing naysayer when I was in college. I was like, I want to be a writer or a teacher, and marketing is for sellouts. And then I realized if you want to build an audience and you want to do the work that you want to do, marketing is part of that. And so I had to really change my mentality toward it. And now I actually really love marketing. And I think when independent creatives can embrace it, it's really fulfilling and fun and creative in its own right. So I'm excited to delve into this this topic today. So thanks for having me. And I'm going to apologize ahead of time because I have a bit of a cold. So I'm very kind of congested.
That's the season for it. You're good.
Yes.
Great. And Stu?
Hi, I'm Stu. I am the producer of the Miskatonic Playhouse podcast and co-founder of said podcast, which is a podcast that supports the community content of the Miskatonic repository. We play, we run, we review your scenarios as well. I've also published a few scenarios myself, including, which I dropped on the floor, that was a really good move, including The Dragon of Wantley, which is available in print on demand, and the Emmy award-winning Host and Hostility, both of which I have done a fair amount of marketing for, including dressing up in silly costumes to publicise. And it just so happens that this silly costume might potentially be to publicise another one that might be coming on soon, which I will mention shortly, very, very shortly to everybody. But yes, that is me.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So what I want to do first, before we get into the nuts and bolts of how to do it, Ashley, you mentioned, you had started out with kind of a resistance to marketing, right? Now, I think a lot of us, without a lot of experience, may have a cynical or suspect view of what it is and what it does, and whether it's even worth doing. So could you, give us like the marketing 101, like what is it, and specifically what is it for people like, us and like the attendees who are, kind of doing things at this scale?
Sure. So I kind of want to first say what marketing is not, because this is what kind of informed my my feelings toward marketing for a long time. I felt like marketing was incompatible with like earnest creative work, because it felt disingenuous to constantly be promoting myself. And I'll say, like, the way I thought about this was like 20 something years ago. So marketing as a field, as an industry, has changed a lot since then, in a lot of ways for the better, which I think is kind of an unpopular opinion. But I feel like now it's important to define marketing, especially within creative spaces, as a way to build an audience, build community, oftentimes earn sales, or have people basically, support the products that you're selling. Because even as creatives, we are providing products and content. And I know those words can be kind of not super pleasant, but that is kind of how we have to think of it. It doesn't have to be a bad thing, but I think embracing terms like that is important when you're thinking of things from a marketing perspective. And marketing is multifaceted. there's different types of marketing. There's, content marketing or creative marketing where you're using, storytelling to basically market your work. And then there's like data marketing where you're really focusing on the analytics and kind of the demographics of your target audience. And then there's, lots of blends of both. So those are just kind of like high level umbrellas of like the different aspects of marketing that you can delve into. But yeah, I like to think of marketing as a way to hone your personal brand, who you are as a creative, the kinds of work that you do, the stories that you tell, and thinking from the opposite perspective, who do you want to attract with that work? And how do you need to connect with those people? And those are big questions, and there's a lot of different strategies there. But if you can think of that, that's kind of the first step to thinking like a marketer is, how do I reach the audience that I want to reach? And what are the different strategies and resources that are available to me to do so? So that's the very high level view of marketing.
Great. And then I'm gonna go back to you one more time because you mentioned branding, right? And other than, for those of us who play down darker trails, a hot iron on the back of a cow, what is branding here? And again, at our scale, right? Without like a very large budget for advertising and such. What are we looking to do? And why is it important to establish a brand?
Yeah. And actually, I love branding. And again, I think to just kind of dismantle a myth about branding is that branding, a lot of people think of branding as design, graphic design, like your logo and your color palette on your website. And that is a tiny part of it. But when it comes to branding, especially in our community, it's communicating who you are as a creative. It's what I like to think of as your why statement. Like, why do you do the things that you do? Who are you? What do you do? Why do you do it? And how can people connect with you is kind of the essence of your personal brand. I think as creatives, understanding your personal brand is a vital step toward creative success, no matter what you want to do, because it forces you to think about those things. Like, what do you like to do? Easier said than done. Like when you're going to like make your online portfolio or make your website, what information are you putting on it? And unless you kind of reflected on that beforehand, that can be a really challenging step. So I think it's really impactful for creatives to think about their personal brand, to think about what makes them unique. And that can also mean embracing the fact that you are a jack of all trades. It doesn't mean that you have to have a very specific niche. It's more like how you can clearly communicate that to other people so that you can get the opportunities that you're seeking, and how to communicate that succinctly, because the way we brand ourselves online right now means that most people are interacting with us in these kind of short snippets. They see a glimpse of us on social media, or, they see a headline in their inbox and things like that. So it's like we have a brief opportunity to communicate our brand to other people. So the more you can reflect on that early on, before you even start making any sort of marketing materials, the better you'll be for your own creative career, because it also helps you determine what kind of opportunities you're actually seeking, because you don't have to take everything that comes your way, and you don't have to it's okay for you to have some specific things that you want to do. So the more you know that about yourself, the more you can communicate that to others.
Great. Thank you. And I'm going to maybe get out over my skis here a little bit and conjecture that branding, should or can start even before the release of your first product. And I assume, in our audiences, we typically have a lot of people who are kind of repository curious, right? Like they want to maybe publish something, but it seems daunting. And then I'm just putting myself in their shoes, and they're saying, well, I'm only publishing the one thing. I don't know if I have to go through this whole branding exercise. So I want to hear, I'm gonna jump around a little bit because I don't want to. I know that you have a course on this, and I'm not trying to sneakily get your entire curriculum out today. But I want to hear from each of the panelists, thinking about what you've done, what you're doing, what is your brand, and how do you establish that kind of independent, like what kind of things do you do independent of any individual release to reinforce or promote your brand? So Heinrich looks thoughtful, so I'm going to start with you. You may not be startled by this question. Let's try you first.
Well, I'll talk about when I first joined the Miskatonic repository, which was about 6 years ago now. And I started by knowing I was going to write scenarios, and I was going to do at least one. But even as I was writing that one, I was leaving open opportunities to expand from that. So my initial idea was something along the lines of, hey, maybe let's see if we can produce 3 scenarios over the course of 3 years. Each of them is going to focus on one of the great old ones. In our case, it was Hastur and a Cthulhu-like being, as well as sort of the Dunwicchian horror and Yog-Sothoth. So starting with that one, I wanted to create sort of a series where people could associate my scenarios with, if you pick this up, you know you are going to get a pretty deep dive on one of the great old ones. And if that is your jam, that's great. That's going to provide you sort of an instant in of wanting to get more. And I also knew that if I was going to be serious about this, I probably was going to need to publish more than one scenario, because there is a cumulative effect of putting out one thing, and then folks who like that are able to see the other things. And it really, really helps broaden your audience and enhance the number of people who are interested in your stuff and able to find it, right? That's so much of what marketing is about. What happened then for me was, as I became more involved with Miskatonic repository convention and the community in general, I began to build my brand really around the community. And I discovered that, in part because of marketing, the joy I get from helping to promote others and helping them achieve sort of what I had felt I had done by just getting on the repository, right? Just getting scenarios out there. That made me feel incredible. And it was something that I knew other people would also get enjoyment out of. So as I focused more and more on helping develop others and encouraging them to get out there and publish their stuff, and less on me publishing scenarios, the more sort of Heinrich Moore Presents, the YouTube channel, which has videos on marketing, which has videos on how to write scenarios, all of these things, that sort of just evolved. And now, I like to think that folks find me and then they find my scenarios. And that's kind of how my brand, if you will, evolved.
And Stu, same kind of question, what, independent of any individual product, how do you kind of promote your brand, develop your brand? What do you want to be known for, and how is that working for you?
I'm actually going to jump back over to Heinrich on that, because the one thing he didn't mention was his Heinrich Guide series, which is now putting together. And as he said, people find Heinrich, people find Heinrich's products, and of course Heinrich's Guide has Heinrich's name right across the top. We've got Heinrich's Guide to Character Creation, which I also have here because it's an absolutely fantastic book. But we've got your forthcoming Heinrich's Guides as well. And that, I think, is a way of doing it. If you can put your name at the front of your scenarios, at the forefront of what you're doing, people are going to think, oh, I've seen that. I already know this one. That's a great one. Let's go for that as well. For myself, the branding that I sort of go for is, I'm a big handout maker. And I actually started off picking up Call of Cthulhu because I watched a Seth Skokowski video where he said, well, you can make proper handouts. I'm sold on that. And when it came to running scenarios, before I even plotted the campaign, I remade a load of handouts for it. Then I made a new scenario, wrote a new scenario for slotting into a campaign, and decided I'm going to publish that. But all the handouts were already made. Again, Host and Hostility, it was putting the handouts front and forward on the publicity. So when it came to setting up the product page on Drive-Thru-RPG, if you look at any of my scenarios, you'll notice that there's a big picture frame with all the handouts in physical on there. And when you buy the product, you're getting the PDF or the hardback copy. You're not getting these handouts here, but there are tips inside on how to recreate these handouts in physical. So I feel my sort of branding here is very much taking the scenario, this is what you can do with it. So if you get one of my scenarios, fingers crossed, you're going to like the handouts on it as well. But again, you're right, you start off by writing one scenario. Dragon of Wantley was written for a group of friends, and then I decided to publish it. Host and Hostility was very much written with the aim of publishing, trying to get it out around the same sort of time as Regency Cthulhu, because we knew that was coming out. So it's a very much a case of just having fun with it, I suppose.
And Ashley, both for your own projects, and then just, your general advice for people that are starting out, what would you advise there?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that you do not have to have some massive epic portfolio to find great opportunities and find an awesome community and start to build your name. I think kind of the common thread here is that it helps to find something that makes you special and unique. But that also just kind of, kindles your personal fire. Like, what do you like to do? Make that your brand. Your brand does not have to be based off of what you think the market needs. And it's very difficult to time the market anyway. The best that you can do, especially as independent creatives, is to embrace the things that you really like. And I came to tabletop through D&D, not through Call of Cthulhu. I wish I would have started with Call of Cthulhu, because it really, actually, a lot about it really speaks to me and like the things that I like, because what I wanted to explore in D&D was kind of these darker atmospheric themes. And so I made that my personal niche when I was first starting out, because I just wasn't really seeing the work that I personally would be drawn towards. So I'm like, I'm going to write things that I think are cool. And then that's how I was able to kind of create an audience based off of the things that I liked. So just a couple of kind of action points for people is embrace the things that you like. You do not have to do what someone else is doing. If you want to do this for the long haul, it needs to be sustainable for you, and which means that you have to kind of maintain your own personal motivation and interest in the things that you do. So if you pick projects and you pick kind of a personal direction that is based off of what you actually like, you'll be better set up for the long haul. It's not that it's not hard work, but you'll set yourself up for success from the get-go. And another thing is like, don't be afraid to embrace being a new creative. It's okay. Everyone has to start somewhere. And the more you can communicate to people like what you are looking for, the more likely someone is to give you that yes opportunity. Like here at Storytelling Collective, we're always looking for like new instructors, and people are like, I've never taught anything before. That is like not a deal breaker for us whatsoever. If we know that you have a passion for something and that you're dedicated enough to try, then we're more than happy to work with you on something. And I think the same goes for a lot of writing opportunities and creative opportunities. So finding that internal confidence, even before you feel like you have something to show for it, is vital. And I know that it's hard to do that. It feels weird to be like, I'm a writer, but I don't have something to show you yet. But you still are a writer. You still are a creative. Like, embrace that. And there's a quote that I quote all the time in Storytelling Collective. People are probably tired of me hearing it or hearing me say it, but it's by Ira Glass from NPR. And the gist of the quote is basically like, as a new creative, like, you have taste, you know what you like. It takes a while to kind of build up your personal craft, but you know, like, what you like. So use your taste to kind of guide your personal branding and what makes you special and unique. And I love what the fellow panelists were saying about like having just kind of your specific like niche. Like handouts that's brilliant, especially in Call of Cthulhu, where handouts are like a big part of the game and what people kind of expect from that. Like having that be a focus, I think, is really smart. So as you're kind of entering into this community, think like, what do you feel like is missing? And is that something that is that a niche that you can fill? Is that something that excites you? And that's a really kind of good place to start. That's being a little bit strategic too about your entry point. So yeah, it's okay to start somewhere. Everyone has to start somewhere. You don't have to wait to brand yourself until you have something. Actually, it's better to have a brand before you start creating, because it drives the direction of your work, and you can be way more thoughtful about the projects that you choose to do. Because a mistake that a lot of independent creatives make, myself included, when I was starting off as a freelancer years ago, is that you just kind of say yes to everything. You're like, yeah, I'll do this. Then you burn out. You burn out hard because you're doing everything. And unless you really like doing everything and it really lights your fire, it's probably not the best direction. So kind of being thoughtful about what you actually do like helps you make smarter decisions as you get started. I wanted to quickly read a comment from the chat, if that's okay. Because Leslie posted this wonderful comment. Lifting others up is an awesome way to help others with their creations while being a valued member of the community, which leads to further recognition of your name and your own products. And I think that's just such a great sentiment. It's something we really believe at Storytelling Collective. It's kind of the basis of everything we do. We want to encourage learning and community. And that's also, I think, a great starting point for people, is like, you don't have to do all of this alone. You can support other people, and in return, you'll probably be supported, because if you're consistent about what you put into a community, you'll get that back. And I'm not saying you should do that for the sake of getting something back, but you'll find you'll start to kind of witness like where the holes are in the industry that you can start to fill by being active in your community and supporting other people. So that's just, I think, a great takeaway from all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big part of the MRCon as well. It's elevating voices in the community. And I think you had mentioned, Ashley, that, it's important to follow your passions and the things that you like, let that be incorporated into your brand. And part of that is that, people get to know what you're interested in and what you seem passionate about. And like in my case, where a lot of what I do are group projects with other authors, if I've reached out cold to people and said, hey, I haven't met you, but I've seen a couple of your pieces and you seem to be really interested in this. I'm doing a project on that. Would you like to join? And that can yield, really nice collaborations. Similarly, it's okay, as Ashley was saying, to say no to things. I turned down a project about 6 months ago because I was thinking, it was really kind of a gonzo, like Rick and Morty sci-fi thing that would have been a lot of fun, but it's so far from what I usually get excited about in my writing that I'm like, you know what? I think I'm just going to let somebody else do this, because that's like just going to derail me a whole lot, because I've got not a whole lot of time, so I've got to pick my projects carefully. So I want to move on a little bit from branding, right, and talk about the marketing aspect. The thing that we hate to see is somebody puts a ton of effort into their product, whether it's the first one or the next in a series one. And you can tell it's been really carefully edited. It's maybe they've invested in art and they've done, the physical marketing parts, which we'll talk about. But they post on it in the Call of Cthulhu Facebook group, and it just lands with a thud. And 6 months later, it's sitting on the repository under copper. And we know that it's not subject matter, right? Because you can sell anything, because I've gone silver with, a Victorian lady random scenario generators. You can literally sell anything on the repository. So how do we avoid that horrible fate for people? And let's start with Ashley there then.
Oh, okay. Yes, well, I have a lot to say on this, but I look forward to hearing what my fellow panelists have to suggest as well. One thing is you have to be really consistent with marketing. It feels weird because you feel like you're talking a lot about your project, but from other people's perspective, they're not seeing every single thing that you're sharing and posting. So like if you post on Twitter, even if you post on or X, I'll share my thoughts on Twitter later if we have
we're gonna do some counter marketing and just call it Twitter, and that's
yeah.
we're gonna deny their marketing push here.
Yeah, seriously, talk about like a not good approach to marketing. But I mentioned Twitter because that's where the tabletop community has historically been very active. But I say that as an example because when you put out a tweet, it has like a shelf life of like a couple seconds. So even if you have 10,000 followers, a small fraction is going to see that. Most of them are going to miss it. So if you posted every single day, once a day, it feels like a lot to you, but other people are not going to see that. So you have to have this kind of multi-pronged approach. That does not mean that you have to be visible or active on every single platform. That is not worth your time as a creative. It is important to pick the platforms that you feel are the best worth your time, and also what you personally enjoy. I personally like Instagram way more than I like most other platforms, so I spend a lot of time there and I try to build a community there. It's not necessarily the platform that works for everyone or where the entire tabletop community is, but I like it, and so I can be consistent because I enjoy being there. So you have to be consistent. You have to post a lot, especially on social media. I'm a big fan of email newsletters and having an email list for reasons that maybe we can delve into later, but mostly because you don't really have to fight social media algorithms quite as much. You don't have to be thinking so much about how to game the algorithms. And a lot of social media platforms thrive on people being really consistent there, which means that you kind of have to be on this hamster wheel of always posting, always creating content, always sharing, etc., in order for it to embrace you and show your work to other people. So you have to post a lot. Don't feel weird about it. What you think is going to be a lot is not a lot to other people, because someone's not going to see it at one point, so they might see it at another point. So being consistent and continuing to market your work even when it's been out for 6 months. Like once your work is out, that's kind of where the marketing begins. It doesn't just start and stop on the day of release. There's a lot of buzz that you can create around release, but that's not the only place. And I see a lot of creatives put amazing work out, like you said, Evan, and then they don't really share it for months on end. You don't always have to be sharing new things. You can reshare the work that you've been working on as part of your portfolio. Like use get as much mileage out of a project as you can. I think the lead up to launch is also very important. Another reason why I personally like email marketing, because you can, do a cover tease, you can share parts of your process, you can give excerpts, you can do a free download, like you can do a lot leading up to the point where you release something. So by the time you have released something, you have an audience already. There's a lot of buildup and a lot of follow-up to marketing. And that's where I think creatives get daunted by marketing, because it's a lot of work. I would say to pick like a couple things that you can do very consistently. And when I say consistently, it doesn't have to be daily, doesn't even have to be weekly. It's just a consistent schedule that works for you. And thinking like long-term about how you want to continue to promote a piece of work that you've done. If you've invested time into putting together an amazing module, it deserves to be promoted and marketed consistently. One other thing just to that you can make use of is your community. I hate the kind of term influencer marketing. That's a whole other topic. But in tabletop, use the folks in your community to help share your work. Use, and when I say use, I don't mean like use as in like expect people to do work for you with nothing in return. Build a community, and then when you have something to share, you have people that you can share it with, and you can do a trade. You can say, hey, will you share my work in your email list, and I'll share your next piece in my email list, or I'll do a boost for you on social media. There's a lot of strategies that you can take to make use of your community. But in this day and age, word of mouth marketing is really powerful. So when someone can actually like endorse your work, that goes a long way with people, especially if they are someone who already has an established audience. That's why, again, knowing the kind of work that you like to do is really helpful, because you can seek out other creators who are doing things that have maybe a similar feel or genre, and partner up with them, collaborate with them, even if it's just through doing some collaborative marketing efforts. So yeah, it can be a long process to think about your marketing strategy, but it doesn't have to be complicated. It just has to be sustainable and something that you commit to doing with some regularity, because posting just on Facebook probably won't be enough, and your work deserves to be celebrated. So you have to kind of commit to how you're going to do that. There's a lot more to say, but I don't want to take up too much time.
That's great. Thank you. That is huge. And I want to just echo that, because I think there's a lot of shyness, right? I think all of us, if I had to warn a guess, all of us would probably default to calling ourselves introverts if we had to. And it's okay to be shy, but your work has value, you have value, and you should be proud of that. So I'm going to go to Heinrich, who has really, especially in your last couple of releases, has really started building an incredible pre-release hype machine. And if you could talk a little bit about, what you're doing there, and also how much effort that takes, right? As assume that the standard person is tired and busy all the time, or is that just me? And how feasible is it to do what you do in support of a release?
Yeah, I find it very difficult. There's a lot to say about that. I would highlight. So I'll start by talking about some of the things I've done for this hype machine you believe I've created, which is very kind of you to say. And then I'll talk about why I've gone about it in the way I have. So aspects of how I have tried to release or promote an upcoming release, the Carcosa Guide, is leveraging the success of the previous publication. So as Stu mentioned, I've decided to put my name on Heinrich's Guide to Character Creation. I'm putting it on Heinrich's Guide to Carcosa. So folks that like one product, and fortunately many people do, are hopefully going to be at least curious about this other product, right? So there's that brand recognition. I also, for the first time, decided, as I'm working on this product over the course of the past 2 years, give or take, wouldn't it be interesting, maybe, if there were a series of videos that just saw me go through that process? What does it look like to actually create this kind of a product? It's tough to understand in the abstract. So I just started a series called the Carcosa Diaries, and there's like 13 of them, and their release schedule is very irregular, a point that I'll come back to in a second. And it's just, it starts with me like holding up my notebook and going, here's where we're starting. Like, here's my idea bank. Here's the things I want. And it goes on to, well, here's what I tried and that didn't work. So, back to the drawing board. And it goes on to like layout. And look, here's the art, and here's where we've arrived at. To hopefully like get people interested. I also came up with what I call gimmicks, which are ways that gimmicks isn't like the nicest word, but it feels appropriately self-derogatory to me, because it's ways of hopefully getting folks interested, but also getting them invested and leveraging their help, because I benefit immensely from other members of the community. And so I want to make use of that. And so I, for example, realized that because this product is now like 80,000 words, I can't read it again. I just can't do it with fresh eyes. So let me just do out a call and see who would be willing to help with proofreading. And, they'll get a shout out in the book, and I'm going to be appreciative. There's going to be discounts. And we just divided it. And we had like 10 to 20 folks who signed up, and they each took a chapter, and they just, read through that. And it was a huge help to me. But hopefully also it got them interested in the book, right? Because they actually get to see a slice of it. And maybe they tell others about that, right? And there you generate that kind of word of mouth. So those are some of the things I've done to promote the guide. I've run it at conventions, like when I'm playtesting it, right? So that I'm able to show people what does it look like in the creation process. And so why did I go about it like this? Well, there's good reasons and bad reasons. Right. So let me start with some bad reasons. The bad reasons are the character creation guide was pretty successful. And so there's pressure to want your next book to also be successful. And so, for some, that's a positive. For me, I think it's a bit of a negative. I think it's probably put unhealthy pressure on me in that regard. And that's something that I'm going to want to keep an eye on, going forwards. Because, well, it's a thing to be proud of in and of itself. Right, not for its effects, but that goes to why did I go about it like this, and it goes to intentionality, or as Ashley said, sort of thoughtfulness in how you do your marketing. And I think folks engaging in marketing really need to be aware, why are they doing what they're doing? What are they hoping to accomplish? It's easy to say, well, because I want to sell more copies. And that's a great reason, right? Obviously. And my videos on marketing are called How to Make Numbers Go Up, right? How to make those sales numbers go up. That's absolutely valid. But for other folks who are just proud of actually accomplishing getting a scenario out there, that's the reward. And you don't need to feel burdened by marketing if that's not why you're doing it, right? So the things I did then were things that, yes, were supposed to leverage publicity to hopefully increase sales and make it a more attractive product, get people interested in it, but also were supposed to be things that I found interesting. So a video designer diary series, I'd never done that. I was interested. It was a new skill set, so it was something of interest to me to do, right? The music video that just dropped, I have a friend, he does music. I heard him play a song about Carcosa, and I was like, that's the song for the Carcosa guide now. Let me figure out how to make a music video, right? And so it's all of these new skill sets. So it's things I enjoy as an amateur community creator, and that is leveraged then into my marketing strategy. Because if I'm just doing it for the sake of marketing, not going to happen, right? Not going to happen. And the Carcosa diaries were interesting, but ultimately, my release schedule dropped off. And it's because it was really difficult to sustain. And listen, I don't do a lot, right? I sit right here, I have my webcam on, and I hit record. And I know that if I do anything beyond that, right, if I like over edit the video, if I do too many takes, if I revise my talking points too many times, then it's just never going to get released. And so I know my bar has to be a bit low, because otherwise I'm just not going to get it out there. All right, I'll stop there.
No, that's great. And Stu, you've mentioned you sort of handouts as an incentive alongside the release. Do you have any kind of ramp up? Do you have any push that you do once something's come out? What do you look to for your marketing around and post release?
So one thing that I've never done, and actually I'm thinking it probably is worth giving it a go, is a bit of pre-release stuff. I just normally drop it cold. Here it is, there's my scenario. But something I found works quite nicely is, and as Ashley said, you need to keep mentioning that you've got this scenario out there. And as you said, Evan, too many scenarios, good scenarios, are sitting there under 50 sales. I can name a good number that I've picked up and I've read through, and I thought, this is fantastic, this needs more. Exactly. Keep looking, it's not sold many copies at all. But the reason is, it's because the author has written it. I only found it because I was looking through the repository, finding more scenarios for the Playhouse map. If I hadn't been looking through the repository, I wouldn't have known those scenarios were there. So there is a certain element of keeping I'm going to call you the public, keeping the public aware of what you've produced. That said, you need to make sure that you're not oversaturating your message. So when you are publicizing your scenario, let the public know what's good about your scenario. Let the public know why they should consider this scenario. So too many scenarios, publications out there, people will post, here is the link to my scenario, buy my scenario. And you see people who are posting the same link every single time, comes up once a month, buy my scenario, here's the link. People don't click on it because why should I? If you can post the scenario and say, buy my scenario, it's set in 1920s Prohibition era, and you've got to solve the speakeasy murder. That grabs you. That gets you. You know what's going on here. Another way to play the algorithms a little bit is Facebook likes images. If you're going to be sharing a link, you need to make sure you've got a picture to go along with it. Because if there's not a picture there, Facebook will say, no, we're not interested. I'm going to show you a picture of a cat. And that is the way that algorithms work. You've got to try and play the game. So you'll notice whenever I advertise Dragon of Wantley, Host and Hostility, Drop of Nelson's Blood, I will share a picture. Now, sometimes this is just a photograph taken of the book. This is a photograph of me holding the book in silly clothing, or this is a photograph that I photoshopped with pictures on silly hats. I like putting silly hats on my cover artwork. So whenever I share a Drop of Nelson's Blood or a Dragon of Wantley or a Host and Hostility advertising post, there will always be a picture of what you can expect. Now, one way that I like to publicize is I like to choose set special dates. So for Dragon of Wantley, I first published it in March of 2022, but in April of 2022, April the 23rd, it's St. George's Day. St. George, saint well known for killing a dragon. So what did I do? I put it on sale for a discounted price for that weekend only, got a bit of a boost in the sales. Coming on later, we ended up with Christmas coming around, so I stuck Christmas hats on everybody. Great. Host and Hostility. It came around, published in November of 2022. In December 2022, it's Jane Austen's 247th birthday. So I discounted it down to $2.47, stuck a birthday hat onto Jane Austen, stuck it into the picture. Great, you got a bit of a boost. But people are then more aware of what's going on in your scenario. Obviously, Host and Hostility, you've got all the Regency stuff coming on as well. But if you're saying, look, here's Jane Austen, it's her birthday, buy my scenario, people start associating your scenario with the event that you're publicizing there as well. Doesn't always work. I put a sale on for King George III's birthday, where all three of my Regency products were on sale. I sold 2 copies based on that. It's a bit hit and miss, but these things happen. And again, it's very much a case of just choosing your time to put the scenario out. You don't want to be telling everybody every single moment, every single second of the day that you've got this scenario. But on the other hand, you don't want to say, I've got my scenario, that's it, goodbye, I'm not going to talk to you again. A certain element of this also comes into the platform that you're using. I've actually said, if you're wanting to use Twitter or X or Muskworld or whatever you want to call it today, you've got that fraction of a second of window that you get in. So you want to be pushing that a little bit more frequently. Facebook likes to show you the same posts over and over again. So you've got a little bit more leeway there. You post something, it will be seen by people eventually. Reddit is a great place to publicize your scenario. However, the Call of Cthulhu subreddit has a rule where you're not allowed to publicize more than once a month. And people on Reddit generally don't like too much publicity. So again, the way to play that system, and sorry to any Redditors who don't want their system being played, is to make sure that you're telling them something new. Put it forwards that this is something interesting and new, a fact about this scenario. Oh, by the way, you can buy it. Not buy my scenario. One thing I have seen people do quite successfully on Reddit for publicizing is when people ask, I'm running a one shot, I'm looking for a scenario, can anybody make any suggestions? The people who say, this is my scenario, run that, don't do particularly well. The people who say, here are 4 scenarios that fit your bill, by the way, this one is mine, tend to get quite a lot of interest on that as well, because you're perceived as being helpful, you're perceived as promoting the scenarios of other creators, and oh, it just so happens that your scenario also fits the bill. Again, it comes around to that community element. If you are supportive of the community, if you are supportive of your fellow creators, they'll be supportive back to you. And that's where the Miskatonic Playhouse has been trying to help out here as well. If you've got a Miskatonic repository scenario and you want it to be played, submit it to the Miskatonic repository, Playhouse, submit it to the Miskatonic Playhouse, and we will aim to get to it and hopefully play an actual play scenario. We'll publicize that. That's another string to your bow. You can then say, here we go. Are you interested in this scenario? Here's an actual play of it. This is how it goes. Gets the keepers involved as well. Now, a lot of this is from my own personal experience, so your mileage may very well vary, but it's a lot of it is just giving it a go, seeing what works for you, seeing how you can get it to work for you, and don't be afraid just to keep going with it. Just make sure you're actually telling people why they want your scenario, not just sharing a link of here is the scenario as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned, the submitting to the Playhouse is phenomenal. And I think Ashley had also, and Heinrich, you had both mentioned kind of leveraging other people in some way, leveraging in a nice way, not in an exploitative way. And again, my energy level generally means that I'm very happy to do collaborative projects, but don't generally do a ton of individual marketing. And the way that works for me is, like with in Strange Seas, which we have, keep an eye out around Trafalgar Day. We'll have something to tell you then relating to that physical relic being held in his hands. I had six odd other authors on there, right? And some of those folks are more well-known than me, and some of them have much more energy for marketing than me, and they're going to help sell my contribution to that project. When I was fortunate enough to have funds to hire Alex G for layout, he, as he should, is very proud of his work, and he helps publicize the things that he works on. And so when he did layout for a project, yeah, exactly, he I was able to benefit from that. I want to embarrass Bridget Jeffries slightly, because getting to run my scenarios on the Symphony Entertainment stream is probably the biggest individual boost to sales that I've ever had. I started to chart those out, but then things came up this week and I didn't get a chance to make a nice chart. But you can actually see in sales of, I think I ran In Strange Seas there, I ran Debbie Townsend Dagon, and you can see when I go through my sales, I bump on the day of the stream, and then another bump when she releases it on YouTube. And these are like substantial increases for those time and a little time after. So if you are able to cultivate a good relationship with someone who streams, and we will be talking about that at a panel at 5:00 Eastern today, about 4 hours from now. If you're able to get your product onto a stream, it is going to help you tremendously. Yes, and then the review is the next thing. We're fortunate to have several really good reviewers here. We've got Leslie here, we've got Bud here. We've previously talked at a panel at the Chaosium Con. We talked to Seth Skrzykowski, was part of that panel, and Nick was part of that panel, though I think he just dropped off. Reviews, again, if you can approach the reviewer with kindness, humility, and a knowledge of what they might be interested in, and not just say, here's my book, review it. A thoughtful review. I don't even want to say necessarily a glowing review, right? A thoughtful review that shows that the reviewer is interested in your product and willing to engage with it, even if they find some things to pick at, right? Because there are certain reviewers who will not put a review out in the world without picking at it in some way, can help. And if nothing else, it helps. It makes you feel better because someone was bothered enough to read your stuff and say something about it. The reviews, anecdotally on Drive-Thru-RPG, I don't know how well those drive sales. I have no idea how to measure that. But that's really veering into a different topic. But as like putting good karma out in the world, if you are a creator, try to make time to review other people's stuff, and especially if it's positive, and leave them a good review, leave them a little bit of narrative that makes them want to keep going. So before I open it up to questions, there's so much, obviously, actually you were able to design a whole course around this. But I want to ask the panelists what else they feel like we should talk about before we open it up for people's questions. So let me start with Ashley, because I think you had something in mind.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of touch on the importance of authenticity in marketing, because that came up a lot when both Heinrich and Stu were talking. And I think there's a few different aspects to this. One is just being authentic and kind of real with your visuals and your production. I love what Heinrich was saying about like not spending a lot of time editing videos and just kind of like, shooting things as they are, because it means that that's a more sustainable production schedule. And I think that that's a good takeaway for any aspect of the creative process. Like, what can you do to reduce friction in your creative process so that you can make things? And when it comes to marketing, that's especially important. You do not need to have overly glossy, beautiful, like production value when it comes to marketing in your published work. I know that that's important to a lot of people. It's important to me. But actually, and like what Stu was saying, what does well on social media are things that look real. Like if you over design an ad, for example, it won't do as well with engagement as something that's just kind of you wearing a silly hat, or cats wearing hats. Someone suggested that. I'm like, that's actually probably a really smart tactic. So the more authentic you can be in how you're actually presenting your marketing materials, not only saves you time, but you'll actually probably get better engagement that way too. So that's a good way to kind of cut some time out of your process, is just keep things really simple and authentic and real looking. Including with like email marketing. Like you don't have to have a ton of graphics in your email. Actually, that's not as conducive to email marketing. So having just some like a couple paragraphs of text is plenty. So whatever you can like not overthink, I encourage you to do so. And also just being authentic in how you're sharing your projects. Stu had excellent advice about how you're accompanying, how you're sharing things. Like, what are you sharing beyond the link to your project? Think of it from your own perspective. Every day, you probably see lots of people sharing things. We're inundated with information and media and creative things right now. What stands out to you is something that can make a case very quickly. So you have to be constantly thinking, how can I make the case for my work? What's the why statement for both yourself as a creative and a particular project? And in general, marketing is like, it rewards being scrappy. So like the same way you can approach being an independent creative, being scrappy, using the resources at your disposal, not overthinking things, not spending too much time perfecting something, because perfection is a fruitless pursuit. Don't aim for perfection, aim for your like good enough, your personal view on what good quality is. But the scrappier you can be, especially with marketing, like get creative, try something different. It might not always work, but over time you'll come up with something that works for you sustainably. I just kind of wanted to just give that as a final takeaway for marketing. Just be authentic, be yourself. You don't have to share every personal thought you have, but the more you can be, the more you'll probably see people respond positively to that. And that's also just how you should navigate in the community. Be authentic, be kind, be supportive, and you will see that come back to you. I think that was what I was going to say about that. Evan, was there something else you wanted me to say?
No, that was
Okay.
it. Yeah, you had alluded to some things, and I thought that would be good to get them out. All right, Stu, again, your kind of pre-question takeaways, anything particularly that we haven't mentioned yet?
I mean, I think Ashley summed it up very well. If you're authentic and if you are part of the community will help you. Actually, that is one point that I think is worth mentioning, is that Discord can be quite a nice way of advertising as well. But a lot of Discords are communities. And if you're signing up to a Discord just to join in, just to jump to the self-promotion channel and say, buy my scenario, it's not going to go down well. Take the time to engage in the community. Take the time to learn about the community. If it's a podcast, have a listen to a couple of episodes. You'll find that it's much more rewarding for yourself. You'll find that actually you'll probably learn more about the podcast, about the what this community is. And not only will this help you once you become part of the community to actually sell more copies, because if you say, I've been around here for a while, I really like this here. Oh, by the way, I know a load of you now through chatting to you. Here's my scenario. Do you want to support me? That's great. But again, you might be able to tailor it a little bit more. Oh, I quite enjoyed that episode that you ran on that podcast here. I've done something fairly similar in this scenario. Have a look, check it out. But the people that jump in, buy my copy, leave the channel, drives people away from you. So it's a case of taking the time. Marketing is mercenary. It's hard to avoid that fact. You're going in there, you're telling people what you want them to do, to buy the copy. But if you take a time to think about the human element of it, if you think about the human behind the computer who might be buying your scenario, you'll have a lot more success as well.
Good. And Heinrich?
I mean, there's too much. I feel like I just want to riff off what everyone else is saying. I want to point out, in connection with Ashley's, like, you know, kind of figure out what your good enough is, how important that is. I did a video on like aim for 80% satisfaction. You know, don't go for 100%, go for 80%. Know that this is not as polished as you could possibly get it, just so that you get it out of there and into the community. I want to riff off what Stu said about investing in communities. One thing that you know, I haven't mentioned is I was the editor on Host on Hostility, and like, the only reason that happened is because of other work that Stu and I did, working together, be it on Miskatonic Playhouse, be it on other titles, that we sort of knew each other and knew to look for one another. And you know, sure enough, when we were at ChaosiumCon, I was promoting that book because I knew what value he had, you know, put into it, what good ideas there were. And Stu, I'm so sorry that I can't hold up your book. I did purchase it again. Stu actually sent me a copy, but the reason I don't have it is because it disappeared at ChaosiumCon. They were running out of copies, and I think someone saw it and was like, I mean, I'm just going to buy this as a promo copy, and they just went off with it, and so now I don't have one, so I need to.
I'll get you another one. Don't worry.
No, I need to order another one. That's going to be my pleasure. But in terms of things that we haven't talked about, there'll probably be questions about like, what are your favorite tips and tricks for marketing? One, and I'll just dive into that because on the topic of what marketing is sustainable for you, when I was getting started, the marketing that was sustainable for me, because I wasn't going to like do Facebook posts and all of this, was running my scenario at conventions. And that was marketing, you know, leveraging my skills as a keeper of Call of Cthulhu and just applying it to the things I had written. And then at the end of a session, I would ask people, well, if you enjoyed it, if you feel comfortable providing an email address or something like that, I will send you a free copy of the scenario. That's obviously easy if you have a few scenarios out, because then they will have that and they will be interested in checking out your other scenarios. But that was a way of just getting my products out there. And people loved having the opportunity to participate in a scenario, knowing they hadn't gotten a sense of everything, right? They hadn't explored everything in the scenario. But now, like, they have this copy and they can go through and they can see what they missed or what they didn't miss, or the totally off the wall direction that their group happened to go in. And that allowed me to, I think, create one of the things that's so important and goes into this community feedback, which is I call them cheerleaders. I say, find your cheerleaders, right? Find people who vibe with the products you are selling. We are all unique snowflakes, but also a lot of the things we like, other specific people like as well. And there are going to be some people who don't enjoy your stuff, and there's some people who are going to just absolutely love your material. And if you can link up with those people, they become such a force multiplier. And I mean, so much of what I've been able to do has been thanks to those individuals, and I'm incredibly grateful to folks like Bridget Jeffries, Bucho. I mean, you, Evan. Like, it's there's just such a long list of folks, yeah, that's a thing that I was able to do just by virtue of running it at conventions.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just, you know, this is a community, and the value of the community, everything from helping me to market, helping me to promote, helping me to just continue working when I'm like, this sucks, I hate it, I don't want to do this anymore. And someone was like, I really like what you're doing, and I'm like, okay, great, I guess I'll keep going and finish this project. You know, that's ultimately, like, money aside, that's what we're here for, right? Is the collaboration in the community and being part of a group that appreciates your work and whose work you appreciate. Also, because Bridget yelled at me the last time because I didn't have a copy of this to hold up, I do want to point out another example of co-marketing. John Hook, Keeper John, and I both had scenarios that are kind of sequels or spin-offs from The Haunting, which is a classic Cthulhu scenario. So when they were both eligible for print, at the suggestion of Nick Brooke, we did it together in the style of the old sci-fi books that used to print back to back. So you can actually go on either of our product pages. You can buy both of them printed in the same volume. And that was maybe the coolest thing I've done so far. And my first book that was in print. So I'm going to open it up to questions. As I mentioned, you can either, I don't want people to just unmute on their own, but you can either raise your hand or put your question in the comments in the chat, and we'll take it from there. So Colin has a question. If you could pick just one thing to start today to help build your brand and market, what would it be? I'm going to go to Ashley first.
There's so many different approaches you can take. I would say that I feel like there's a lot writing on this question. I want to give good direction.
Only 80% good is fine. Don't go for perfect.
Good, yes, good advice. I will apply that. I would start today by doing a reflection activity that's just for your own purpose, to start thinking through your brand. Think through, and actually I can share some, Evan, I don't know if it's possible if I could maybe share some information with you that you can email out to people after the fact or whatever, but
I can post it in the Discord. I don't think I have anybody's email addresses.
Okay, no worries. I just, because I have some actual like reflection questions and activities that I think would actually really help with this. But I think it's important to kind of just sit down, get a notebook or an open document, and think through your brand. Think about like, what kind of work do you like? Think about what kind of work you gravitate toward. So like within the Call of Cthulhu community, whose work do you like? It's okay to start with what you like about other people before you kind of reflect internally, because that actually will probably drive some of what you want to do. Like, oh, I really like this author, but I think I want to do something similar, but a little bit different. And here's where that's different. And only by really thinking through that will you have the framework for your personal brand. And I want you to think about writing some sort of like very succinct I statement. Like, I am a writer or a layout designer or whatever you are, who, writes, atmospheric and blank work. Like, come up with a very simple I statement. It's not going to be the most amazing sentence you've ever written, but if you can do some reflection and kind of try to start to isolate the things that make you unique and what you are drawn toward, that'll give you a really powerful starting point, because that is something that you can use in a lot of different places. Not only can you put that on your social media profiles if you have one, or your website if you're going to build one, or in Discord when you join community Discords and you make an introductory post, like you can put that information within that. But it also will help you think, what do I want to do? Do I want to join a collaborative project that has these themes? Do I want to do my own project? Do I want to connect with someone and, do the editing for their project? Whatever that means to you. If you think through that and actually have something very tangible that you write down, have a document that has this information in it, I think that's a really awesome starting point. And I wish that I would have done that years ago, because I think it would have given me a lot of clarity over the decisions I made throughout my creative career. I do that now after lots of learning and mistakes, but I think that is something I really advise people doing early on. And that's a kind of a high level thing, rather than like, make a Blue Sky account or whatever. But I think if whatever you choose to do, that having that statement and that kind of personal identity clarified will make it easier for you to make kind of the next decision for yourself.
Great, thank you. And Heinrich, same to you. If you had to pick one thing, and it wasn't what Ashley said, then what would that be?
Well, I've already talked about running at conventions, which I think is a very approachable way that folks can approach marketing. I'll echo something that Stu said earlier, which the way I put it is, when you market your material, tell us what's cool about it. I talked about creating cheerleaders earlier, but you are always going to be your own greatest cheerleader. You set the standard. And so when you are marketing your product, you don't need to say it's the greatest. That's not true, right? But you do need to tell us what is cool about it, what is engaging about it. That already is going to put you in the upper 50, upper 25 percentile, of folks doing marketing. And I find myself so often on posts, and I see it on our self-promo channel in the MRCon Discord, folks are like, oh, I'm 20 away from copper, and even that's a step up of like, oh, okay, well, you're motivating me if what I want to do is help get you to copper or help get you to silver or whatever. But you can go further, and you can do it with like 2 additional sentences of just tell us what's cool, and probably you've already put that on Drive-Thru RPG for the description of your scenario. So make sure to tell us that. So I think that's going to be the easiest. If I can only pick one, that should be the minimum. I think everyone can do that.
And Stu?
I'm going to say find a community. Get yourself into the role-playing communities. If you sit on the outside, you'll have produced an absolutely fantastic product, but nobody will know about it. Get yourself in, get yourself talking, talk to other creators. The Miskatonic repository creators club on Facebook. I can't remember what it's called now. The
Creator
Facebook
Circle. Yeah. Circle.
It is an absolutely fantastic place to start. The MRCon Discord, and again, another fantastic place to start. But if you find that community, you get talking to them, find out what they like, find out what they like in a product, find out what they want to see. And if it's something that aligns with your interests, so for instance, you've got a group of people and they're like, yeah, well, I really like playing the sort of 1920s gangsters. You think, well, there we go. There's something that you can build on as well. Write what you want to write. Don't be afraid to twist it slightly to make it fit the popular opinion as well. Be true to yourself. Do write what you want to write. Don't write just because people are interested. It doesn't hurt just to tweak things a little, even in descriptions, even in opinions on if you're describing a scenario. If you know that this group here that you're telling about really like gangsters, you could pick up the gangsters in it. If you know that these people really like mystery, you can pick up the mystery in it. Your scenario is lots of different layers. Choose which layer you want to tell to which community.
And those are all absolutely fantastic. Those are all equally good number ones. And for myself, I can only humbly suggest a number 2 after you've done those more important things, is take a tutorial or a short course on layout, especially if you're not going to be paying a layout genius to do it, only because there are a ton of people who will absolutely ignore a scenario that looks poorly laid out. If they're clicking into it and they do the preview, and it looks like it's just a Word document with nothing else, they'll just go click away from it. And that's just, it's a basal human instinct somewhere in the lizard brain, I guess, that recoils from poorly laid out documents. You don't have to be gorgeous. You don't have to take a designer course in it. There are some really good websites. I think the Storytelling Collective has guidance on this as well, just how to make it look neat and clean, and then you can use all of the free art or public domain art that you want or not or whatever. But a couple of columns, a couple of good harmonious choices on fonts and headings, and you're good. That's all it has to do. But it is I found out to my sorrow that people take that really seriously, and it is important, if you're not going to have someone lay it out for you, just to have it look neat and clean.
People do judge your book by their cover.
They really do. Yeah, they really do. Found out to my sorrow. So we have Bud here of Bud's RPG review, and wanted to share some thoughts on getting your scenario reviewed, and sort of running a convention that really could have been a 5th panelist, but the symmetry of 4 on the screen is better. So I'm going to ask you to unmute for a moment and give you just a couple minute or two to talk through some of those thoughts.
Right, can everyone hear me?
Yep, perfect.
So initially, the thing I would suggest is you have to believe in what you're writing. I mean, I would echo everything that's been said so far. With regard, obviously the one I can talk about is Viral, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, is the biggest selling Miskatonic repository scenario of the last over 12 months. I'll tell you how that came about and how we got to where we are with it. Alex Gillot, you pronounce it Gillot, Alex was a patron of mine for my channel for the longest time, and he sent me a copy of the Pipeline. Now, I did the review of the Pipeline, and we ended up striking up a friendship. And then I started running Impossible Landscapes, the Delta Green scenario, and invited Alex along to write it. In the meantime, I've been writing scenarios for Grogmeat here in the UK. And I'd written one for, everyone knows Liminal, the system Liminal. Yeah? I'd written one around a group of ghost hunters that went to an island off the coast of Scotland and ran it at virtual Grogmeat during the pandemic. It was an offhand mention of it in one of our Impossible Landscapes games that made Alex say, that sounds like a great idea for a Miskatonic repository scenario. And I mean, we started work on it. I know this is about marketing, but to a large degree, you've got to have something really good to market. Yeah. The suggestions I would have would be this. Okay. If you're going to give a review out, if a person does reviews and you're able to send them a physical copy, it goes a long way towards goodwill. Because it gives something people can wave in front of cameras to show people to look at. Okay. I ran viral for the first time at Grogmeat, and I was lucky enough that one of my players was Paul Fricker. And I killed Paul Fricker with his own rules, which because you can't use luck to offset a SAN roll. That got people talking. Because a number of people came up to me after the scenario, after I ran it, and said, Paul's really talking about what a great time they had there. I mean, obviously I'm unprepared here. I'm just kind of riff this. That's true. I killed Paul Fricker with his own rules. He doesn't like to be reminded of it. Trying to think where I was going with this now. Right. Okay. So insight. Now, obviously, I was in the lucky position that I ran this for Seth Gorkowski, and when I ran it, I killed it, and he had a great time. We marketed it based on the fact that Seth gave it a stellar review on his channel, which when you've got 100,000 people tuning in, it's gonna give you sales. We also ran it on the back of my 50th birthday. We knocked 50% off, which gave us a huge boost in sales. If anyone's interested, it's actually coming up to double platinum. It's not far off.
That's great.
It could possibly be the first that gets to Mithril at the rate we're going. Alex ran it for the Miskatonic Playhouse. They took 20 years to put it up. I've listened to it and it killed it. There's so many avenues you can go down with regard to marketing the scenario that don't involve constantly hammering it on social media. Just to give you some impression of how even now that it's where it is, I'm still marketing it. Yeah. I'm in the middle of running it, and one of the players is Scott Dorwood.
Yeah.
So
yeah. It's really. I don't want to cut you off. I just want to make sure that we can move. But I mean, you're absolutely right. Just running it for either getting it in front of reviewers, running it for people at conventions. I have a product that I'm working on, and I managed to run it for Seth Gorkowski at Chaosium Con, and that should it ever come to fruition would be huge. But again, as the reviewers at our last panel told us, right, if you approach a reviewer arrogantly and say you must review this, right, they're going to kick it to the curb. If you say, hey, and Bud, I love your channel, I watch it, I'm familiar with your hands very intimately, or other people, and say what they like and what they're interested in, and you generate excitement, that can be huge. And Bud and Alex, you can have a scenario that goes to quintuple platinum or double mithril or wherever. I mean, I don't know. It continues to climb. I'm honestly just in awe of what you guys have done there. Really, really wonderful. And I do apologize for cutting off. I just want to make sure that we're able to get any other questions or any other thoughts here.
It's a very good point that you're right. You can't just hammer social media, as Bud said. You've got to choose those other avenues. And again, Heinrich, you mentioned as well, running your scenario at a convention is a perfect way of demonstrating what your scenario is capable of.
Yeah.
Running an MRCon, running it in a face-to-face convention, or even going down to your local friendly game shop and saying, I'm going to run a scenario. Anybody interested?
Yeah.
You never know. You get it
Yeah.
out there.
And that's fun too. You had mentioned, Stu, marketing it slightly differently depending on what people are interested in, right? And seeing people play your games at something like an MRCon, seeing people review your games, they may pick up on things that they love about your scenario, that you kind of didn't think too much about. Maybe it was something you tossed off and that became someone's favorite element. And I've done that certainly for mine. People have played it and said, oh, the players really love this. I was like, oh, that was like a text box option for the keeper. And so that went right in the marketing material, right? When you get reviews, please link to them from your product page on Drive-Thru RPG. If someone says something nice about it, please put that quote in there. Or link to the review itself. And then one thing that I do, I don't know if this helps, but I think a lot of us do it. When you start getting medals, best-selling medals, edit that into your thumbnail of your cover. Draping an any across it if warranted certainly can't hurt, but that's of limited utility to the most of us. But it is a nice feeling to kind of update your cover image with the most current medal. And then when people are scrolling on Drive-Thru RPG and it says more from this author, it can be kind of a nice marketing for yourself to have all of your other titles with their little medals on them along the bottom of the screen. Okay, so closing thoughts, I guess. Any of the panelists have anything? Again, you can and should do many hours of discussion on this, but alas, we have only the little bit today. Last thoughts, anything that we missed? Okay.
I feel like there's a lot to say about social media, and I know right now the tabletop community is kind of like fractured on all these different sites right now, largely due to X changing everything that was making it work well for a tabletop community. And I feel like I know it's tempting to it's either tempting or daunting to be involved in like every single one. Like, oh, I have to be super active on Mastodon. I have to be super active on Blue Sky. I have to be like, pick one that has the community that you want to be with. And don't worry too much about it. I've seen a lot of people talking about that lately. Like, where do I go? Go to the platform that is interesting to you to use, that is easy for you to use, and that has people there that you want to connect with, and make that your place. Social media should be a part of your marketing plan. It should not be the entirety of it. There's a lot of great things about it, but it's also, it can be a grind to be really consistent there, and to have your whole personal creative business built on it is probably not a good idea, especially seeing how quickly something like Twitter could change, or any platform. Every platform can change its algorithm in a second, and it could totally dismantle everything that you've built. So use it as like part of it, but don't get too stuck on making that your whole presence and focus. Your energy is better used to create work, like do your actual creative work.
Yeah, I'll just add that for the vast majority of us in the community content programs, we are amateurs, right? We are amateur creators, and that is true whether we are writing, it is true whether we are doing layout, it's true whether we are doing marketing. And I like to certainly hide behind that label. I find that it gives me permission to try things that I don't know if they're going to work. And sometimes they don't. Very often they don't. But sometimes they do. And it's just another skill set that we get to explore. And if you view marketing as that, as just like, oh, I know nothing about layout design, now I'm going to learn something about it. And I know nothing about marketing, now I'm going to learn something about it. It becomes just a fun new skill to learn, as opposed to an obligation that maybe you don't need to take on anyway, if that's not why you are doing this. And many of us, again, 99% of us, frankly, aren't. So, realize that, and also ask for help. One of the things that blew me away in this community, but also just across role-playing games generally, is how often when you reach out to someone that be it Scott Dorwood, be it Bud, be it Alex, like all of these folks, they're very accessible. they're very happy to chat. They're very happy to help out. If you see some marketing you like, if you see someone create a video that you like, you can reach out to them and just ask them, how did you do that? And find out if it's something that you can do. That creates these relationships. And Evan, I'm reminded when Miskatonic Repository Convention got started, and we were just trying to figure out, how do we get panelists to show up for these things? And it turns out you ask. And they come. And so I just also wanted to extend a huge thank you to Ashley and Stu for making the time
Tremendous
to join
work.
here.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. And Stu, thank you for the beautiful job on In Strange Seas. I'm like holding back because I know that we're waiting before we kick it off, but it looks gorgeous, and that's down to you. And thank you.
I want to echo something that Heinrich said, is that we are all amateurs, but the word amateur itself quite often gets a bit of a negative rep, but it comes from the French and the Italian to love. We're doing it not because we're being paid to do it, but we're doing it because we love doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, that should be your game. If you don't sell copies, so what? Somebody will find that scenario, somebody will buy it, somebody will run it, and somebody will have a damn good time doing so. And ultimately, that's really what you can hope for. If you do manage to sell more, great. Can't really go wrong with that as well. But all it takes is one person to really enjoy it, to tell another person, to tell 2 more people, and it spreads. So just keep getting at it, keep doing it, and you'll get there eventually. But the main thing is have fun doing it. If you're not enjoying it, try something else. But if you are enjoying it, you know you found it for you.
Great. Thank you all so much. Yeah, we'll take a little break. We have another panel at 3. We'll be hanging out with Sean Briney of the HPL Historical Society. Speaking of, people that are willing to go on panels, which are way above our pay grade. And we'll learn about making props and handouts. And then at 5 o'clock Eastern time, 2 hours after that, we'll have writing for stage and screen, which is how to get your scenarios in front of audiences, which is suddenly a thing that is possible to do and highly recommended. So thank you, everyone. Tremendous participation. Appreciate everyone being here, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.
Well.